Hello, ma'am.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening, everybody. Before we start, may I request that everybody's mics be kept on mute. Time permitting, we will certainly try and fit in a small interactive session towards the end of the program. But for now, to ensure better quality of recording, I would request all of you to keep your mics on mute.
Should I put it on mute? Should I put on mute?
Yes, please.
Put on mute. Press it. What?
नहीं क्यों समझते हो सो क्या
अच्छा टोन दिसत नाही का काय सुनीता Hi
Hello,
Roshan.
Sunita. Hello.
Hi, very good. Congratulations to you.
Thank
Wonderful day. We've been waiting for this day today.
Madam, good evening. Good evening,
you. Good evening,
Sergeant.
sir.
Here.
Yes, yes. We are from Canada.
Yes, I am from
Are you
Canada.
Canada?
Early
Okay.
morning.
Oh, yes, yes. You begun your day on a good note.
Just sit down.
Okay, Nappinai, shall we start now?
I can only see myself.
Good
Hello,
evening,
madam.
everybody.
Yeah. Nappinai, you
Madam,
can.
good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, madam. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
बस आपला एकदाच झाला प्रश्न परत परत
Congratulations, madam.
I want to see them. See what? Let us see.
Here.
Hello, ma'am.
Nappinai, can we now mute everyone so we can begin?
See, there's from Bhutan said I can't see.
Yes, I've just requested to do that. I'll just wait for him to complete that. So, ma'am, you will also be muted, and then Rahul will
Yes.
unmute you.
Okay.
He'll unmute only the speakers then, after muting everybody. So please give me a minute.
Written.
Good evening, everybody, again. It's wonderful to meet on an International Women's Day, though I also believe that every day is a Women's Day. Before we start today's proceedings, I hand over the podium to Justice Roshan Dalvi, retired, as she has put it in her book too, for an initial process of paying respect to a very senior member of our bar. Ma'am, over to you.
Good evening, friends. It is good to meet you, but I miss one person a lot today, and that is our Dhirubhai Parikh, the nonagenarian who passed away on the 28th of January. He was the one who was with me throughout the working of the first book as well as this book. He has done 2 drafts of my book. Even when my book was in the initial stages and I had done the first draft, he had wanted to read it. He had made so many nice small alterations and given me some suggestions. And today he is not here to see me. Please, friends, for 1 minute, let us have a silent prayer for him. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Hashtag break the bias. That's the theme for this year's International Women's Day. And Justice Roshan Dalvi's book could not have been better timed, not just with respect to today, but for the theme and the work that's being undertaken globally for breaking the bias. Her book addresses various aspects, not merely from the legal perspective, but substantially from the socio-economic, even political and legal perspective. So this holistic book is the walk that I would like to take you all through today. And through the journey, I would like to really explore not just what the book brings to us, but also Roshan ma'am's journey in writing this book. It's wonderful where she shares from her personal perspectives and also brings in the various stories from different aspects of life and not just a narrow spectrum of law. Ma'am, I have been very impressed and very intrigued, and of course, immensely interested in the kind of quotes that you bring to the fray. And I would like to start today's session with this lovely quote that you have adapted, and your accreditation puts it as a modification of a Pinterest picture. And here goes the quote. She has fought 1,000 battles and is still standing tall. She has cried 1,000 tears and is still smiling broad. She has been broken, betrayed, abandoned, rejected, and is still walking proud. Laughs loud, lives without fear, loves without doubt. She is a woman. I believe that this quote truly captures everything that each one of us would have undergone through our various journeys in life. And to start today's session, I could not find anything better than this in terms of setting the stage for the discussions today. To take forward the discussions in terms of what is the role that each one of us plays to ensure gender justice, to ensure gender equity, one of the SDGs that we are working on globally, to ensure that, and this is my theme, when I was asked to talk about hashtag break the bias, the quote I've given for an organization I'm associated with based out of Germany is of gender oblivion. And I'm so happy and I feel always lucky that I had this kind of a background, that I could grow up in gender oblivion. To put it very simply, I grew up in an environment which did not distinguish on the basis of gender, be it in terms of how I grew up, the games I played, and the education that I opted for, the profession, and also the specializations within the profession that I chose. It was complete oblivion. There was not one moment when gender played a role. So to have something like that as the launch pad for my life is something I truly feel blessed about. So when we talk about gender oblivion and we speak about the realities of the day, unfortunately, gender oblivion appears to be more in a perspective rather than in reality. So my hope and prayer for a better future is for gender oblivion. That is, gender to not play a role on any choices that each of us make as individuals, any choices that happen within a system, any choices that dictate behavioral patterns, any choices that impact our lives because somebody else chose wrong. For instance, the kind of crimes that are committed because of gender. So all of these need to be thrown out into oblivion, and we need a world which is not going to be broken down into fragments based on gender. And that is my hope for the future. in our discussions for today and to walk us through not just the wonderful thoughts and perspectives that Justice Roshan Dalvi ma'am brings to the table, but also to share from their own experiences. I have a very illustrious panel with me. I start with our senior most panelist here, Justice Varieva. None of the panelists really need any introduction, but just to share from my personal perspectives with each one of them, I can truly tell you that it's been such a pleasure and an honor to have been associated in some manner with each one of them, to have had the opportunity to appear before them and to participate as in this kind of a program and to host something as I have done now for the second time for Justice Roshan Dalvi. So here goes the list of the panelists and their short profiles. Justice Varieva, as you all know, started from the Bombay High Court, was a judge of the Bombay High Court, and then was elevated to the Supreme Court. He presently practices as an arbitrator. I've had the privilege of appearing before Justice Varieva in 1994-95 when I was still practicing in Chennai, and I'd come over from Chennai to Mumbai at that point of time. And this was my first experience of the Bombay High Court. And this also gave me courage when I decided to move in 2000 to believe that there would not be any kind of hurdle, any kind of discrimination, or, there was no cause for a second thought when I had to plan the move, thanks to the kind of experience I had in Justice Varieva's court. Here I was an absolute stranger, and I did not face any issues in terms of presentation or the reception thereof. And I truly believe that is Bombay High Court for you. And I'm truly blessed to have had nearly 21 years of practice over there. I moved from there to Justice A.P. Shaw, again, who needs no introduction, but as a quick introduction to Justice A.P. Shaw, practiced civil law in the Bombay High Court and was elevated as a judge of the Bombay High Court. He moved from there as Chief Justice of the Madras High Court and thereafter to the Delhi High Court. He also presided over the Law Commission of India and presently practices as an arbitrator. He has conducted many workshops on gender sensitization and mediation in the Bombay High Court. Again, I take a moment to share my personal experience here in a matter I appeared before Justice A.P. Shaw. I have, from my experience in various appearances, found, and also observing him in court, found Justice A.P. Shaw to be extremely affable, very calm and composed. And I can tell you that I have never seen him go red in the face as he did in one very, very sensitive matter that came before him, which was of the Nalco sexual harassment case. When the case first came up, Justice Shaw could not believe the manner in which the Internal Complaints Committee had conducted its proceedings, which had deeply harmed the victims' rights. He took no moment, not a moment, to set aside the Internal Complaint Committee's decision and set up an absolutely independent committee to go into the complaint from the victim. And it was no surprise that the independent committee came forward with the confirmation decision that there was indeed sexual harassment. So this was Justice A.P. Shaw for you. I also had the privilege of working with him when he was chairperson of the Law Commission of India. Sir, Justice Varieva and Justice A.P. Shaw, thank you so much for agreeing to share your thoughts and perspectives in today's session. And we await the same after the fireside chat with Justice Roshan Dalvi. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I move to the hero of the day, as I was mentioning earlier, Justice Roshan Dalvi. Ma'am, you practiced civil law in the Bombay High Court and were thereafter appointed as a judge of the Bombay City Civil Court and principal judge of the Family Court, Mumbai, and then elevated as the judge of the Bombay High Court. You had studied gender laws in Warwick University under the UK scholarship program of the British Council. You're a fellow of the Commonwealth Judicial Education Institute, Halifax, Canada, a Rotary Peace Fellow, and you have conducted many workshops for judges, lawyers, prosecutors on case management, ADR, and gender sensitization in national and state judicial academies. A guest lecturer in TIS in the master's course on access to justice, and the author of the book Tangible Justice. So I was at the National Judicial Academy for one of my sessions, and I had the privilege of attending one of your sessions on gender sensitization. And I cannot tell you that I believe that, you know, what I heard there is truly reflected in the book and a lot more. So I would like to start today's conversation with first the release of your book and then the discussion in respect to the contours of the book. May I request all three panelists to join virtually in the release of the book? I must say that I felt truly privileged that as part of this program, I also got a copy of the book. So thank you so much, ma'am, for this.
You're welcome.
I move further. Ma'am, it is again, as always, a pleasure to converse with you and walk you through the journey in the book. There was one quote in the book which I found very interesting, and I'm going to kind of appropriate it in a way. I'll just explain how. You have relied on the poetess Maya Angelou, Marguerite Johnson, an African-American author who wrote A Phenomenal Woman. And you have quoted the chorus from this, and I quote as thus. I am a woman, phenomenal woman, that's me. Indeed, she's flawsome. Despite her flaws, she's awesome. The reason why I have, I said I'm appropriating this quote, ma'am, is because often I've heard that one of the interpretations of my name, and I know all of you all must be thinking it's an absolute tongue twister, of Nappinai stands for Na Bina or flawless. And I always put in a qualifier to people telling them that I don't want to be flawless. I want to be taken flaws and all. And therefore the appropriation. And going forward, ma'am, it was amazing. During the 2020 COVID lockdown, one of the initiatives that I started along with a friend, in fact, it was interesting to note that you have mentioned about her initiative, Safe City, also in the book. What we had done was a program on cyber safety with a gender lens. And one of the first things we used to speak about in that is the distinction between gender and sex, about how various roles are attributed based on gender, whereas it may just be about male or female. It may not necessarily or ought not to have a role to play in terms of gender. So when we used to talk about the distinction between gender and sex, often I have noticed that people have been very confused. And I started reading your book, and I felt that we could not have explained the distinction better. And I would like to hear from you in terms of not just about the distinction between gender and sex, but also a quick introduction to where and how this journey for this book started, and your experience in terms of the perspectives with respect to gender.
Well, Nappinai, there is a distinction between sex and gender, which is generally not understood. And that is why I took it from all of our learnings, that when we consider the socio-legal aspects, we always talk of gender. And I have given 71 perspectives of gender in the vocabulary in the chapter in which you have just mentioned about sex and gender. And you have given the 72nd one now, gender oblivion, which I have not written about. So these are all the perspectives, the gender roles, gender realities, gender perspectives, gender wars, gender equity, gender equality. All of these things are not sex, but gender. And though we talk about them mainly for women, it really applies to all of us. And it applies to men and boys equally. It applies to transgenders and unigenders equally. Okay. So that is what I wanted to mention about it. And I've set it out as a vocabulary, alphabetically, to give a perspective on how wide this concept is. Okay, and I think you want me to talk about my journey. Yes, yes. And that is you see, ever since I was selected by Justice M.B. Shah, the then Chief Justice, to go to England to study gender, when I realized, why should I do it, that I'm so gender equal, you know, I should have gone to some other male judge who is not gender equal. And then I realized how much there is to learn on gender. And I have at times written articles on and collected pictures, etc. When in COVID, I found that there is some time I put my pen to paper. And that is when I started writing this book, putting all my thoughts of so many years and so many people's things which I have learned from various books, magazines, etc. There are various links which I have given in the book. So if you take an e-book or whatever, then you would be able to get it through, but it's in the text also. And several books that I've referred to where there are unlikely places I've found gender. Just Mr. Falin Ariman is here, and I read 2 of his books out of the 3 ones, and I found 8 such things which I have put in my book. And it was so amazing that when you write about something else, gender always peeps in, you know. And one of the certificates that he has given is that laws don't discriminate between men and women. Men folk do. I really like that. And I've quoted it at the end of my first chapter on laws of gender. So I said the law is not the only thing. It is also sociology. And it is very wrong to say that women must know this, or this book is only for women and only women must attend, or only women must take up those cases. Even judges, lawyers, law students, and all the NGOs and all, they must understand the socio aspect also. In fact, this book will be best if it is broken into 2, the social perspectives and the legal perspectives. And now today, of course, it is all together, the socio-legal perspectives. So I have given you the various perspectives. And if you allow me, I would just give you some of them. You know, Edgar Hoover in 1920, when the women wanted voting rights, said that these women are a national security threat. In 2020, after 100 years, when we celebrated the centenary of the voting rights and the suffragists, we found what kind of a threat they were and how they brought the society together. So you see, and as Kofi Annan has said, that only when girls and women are given their due, society prospers. They have done a lot of studies on the GDP, etc. And they find that in countries in which women are respected, women are given their due, even the GDP rises. So it is an economic perspective also. Yeah. When we had the last recession, we realized in America that there was something called groupthink which was coming up. And why did it come up? Because all the financial consultants were men, and they thought from the men's perspective. But when men and women work together, there is a balance, and they have got different perspectives to bring to the table. When a woman will be investing, she will think of education, insurance, your children, the future. Men didn't think of that, and America went into recession. Today, it has turned around. And there are 2 lovely books which I have quoted in that. Gillian Tate, who has written about fool's gold, and she wrote about how men, like fools, only invested and thought of only money. But that's not all. Women don't think that way. And Sue Harara has written Women of the Street, the strongest job that you can have. And she says, what is it that women cannot do on Wall Street? She says, it's a matter of information and knowledge. Once you get that, you do that, that way. So there are various perspectives that I have given in that chapter, which is after the laws. And interestingly, I would say, we say, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao. I would say it should be Beta Padhao, Beti Bachao. Because the crimes that we have against women are because the men and the boys are not taught how to respect women, how to get around with women. So much so that even on the dances, they say that when you waltz together, when you do folk dances together, men and women respect one another better because they know each other better. They come together, they come close. I saw several folk dances, say of Russia or whatever. Then I saw a folk dance in Indonesia. And it was all the boys coming first and then all the girls coming together. They never danced together. These are the two different societies where you cannot merge if you don't come together. That is what I wanted to write in my book.
In fact, the rugby example that you've given, that the choice of whether a girl wants to play with boys or not should be hers, was again very poignant and cut very close to, it took me back to my school and college days when I was playing basketball, and I played predominantly with boys. And again, at that point of time and in those days, it was rather forward thinking. Ma'am, I wanted to actually also point out that the ball and doll example that you've given was the most poignant, and it hits straight on the head, the nail on the head, because you don't even literally need any more explanation when we talk about gender assumptions and perspectives. Moving forward, you've used Andy Rooney's words, I have learned. And we would like to hear from your perspectives from the bar, the bench, and as a trainer in gender sensitization, that which you have learned and that which you have applied and that which you believe, thanks to your intervention, others may have applied too, in not only better gender sensitization, but also as to make them better people. For instance, you've talked about the kind of reaction you got from somebody who thought they could, about how even women thought that if they have committed a wrong, it was okay for the men in the family to slap them or to get, to physically abuse them. However, that it was not okay if they have not done something wrong. Similarly, you've also mentioned about how a male could not understand your question about, is it okay to slap your mother or beat your mother the way you seem to think is okay with the wife, and he couldn't answer. So all these experiences that you have shared was also very thought-provoking for me, in the sense that I believe that when you walk somebody through those kind of exercises, probably they understand better what we mean by gender equity.
Okay. So I'll tell you about this presently. And before that, I'll only tell you one thing, that I have been told that Justice Varyava and Justice Shah cannot enter this meeting. And maybe then, Nappinai, you could kind of see whether we restart the meeting or whether we can just take them in.
Rahul will work on that, because
Yes.
I got a message also that the publisher's representative was also finding it difficult to enter. So Rahul is on the job.
Rahul has said, I'm told, that nothing can be done unless we restart the meeting.
Oh, is
We
that
start
right?
the
I will
meeting and
speak
we
to him,
restart
ma'am.
the meeting. So if you
Please,
can
please go ahead. I will speak to him in the meantime. Please go ahead.
So I'll answer your question and your perspective. Yes, it is not only that children need a mother. What I have said and what Andy Rooney has said is that the walks that he took with his father around the block did him a great service when he grew up. And these are also gender perspectives. When my son was small, he wanted both of us, the father and the mother. He didn't want one of us. So this is what happens. And right from the beginning, just as we say about the ball and the doll, we have to have the mother and the father, both for nature and nurture. And this is why they say that this nature and nurture phenomenon really brings out the best in women. Now, Larry Summers said that the women are good in verbal scores and the men, the boys in Harvard were good in math. Yes, that would be correct in many cases. But what happens is that when women are nurtured, and if there is a woman who is really good in math, to say that because she is a woman or she's a girl student, she would not do well in math is not correct. And with nature and nurture, the ratio and proportion between the girls and boys in Harvard and other colleges became lower. So it came from 13:1 to 4:1 because they were allowed those things. So it works both ways for your children and for the parents. You know, that is what I wanted to say. And these are all various perspectives on gender. So Nappinai, we can go on, but let them come in. You are muted, Nappinai. Okay.
My apologies. So once I mute myself, I have to rely on my colleague to unmute me, and therefore the confusion. So apparently a lot of people, ma'am, before we continue, since we took this pause, may I request you to move back a bit because otherwise your face is getting cut on top. Yes, that would be better. So if you're moving forward, otherwise you'll have to move your camera back a bit. And apparently some of the participants had not put their name and therefore he had blocked it based on what we had discussed. But I've requested him to ensure that all panelists are in and also to pin us so that the panel will be visible to all of us. So whilst we are waiting for that, and therefore there's no need to discontinue or reconnect, we can continue as is. So whilst we are waiting for the other technical issues to be resolved, I'd like to continue your conversation, ma'am, on this. You cannot separate Nappinai and cyber. So my apologies for now trying to bring together the two issues, but particularly with the COVID situation. On multiple fronts, we have seen an impact on gender. We had a lot of situations. I mean, there was no dearth of crimes against women and children, even prior to COVID, but it just increased a lot more thereafter. Issues that you have raised are very, very important. It came to the limelight more during the virtually enabled COVID phase, such as cyber flashing, as you have explained in the book, which for the uninitiated are the kind of what we colloquially refer to as Zoom bombing, where during school classes and also during meetings, etc., people would just, come into meetings or into uninvited sessions and share things like pornographic content. Imagine young school children being exposed to something like that. And some of the cases reported are of kindergarten children being exposed to something like that. So we have had situations, and in fact, I represented before the Supreme Court in a matter about domestic violence during COVID because victims were locked in with the perpetrators. We have had these online crimes. We have had evolved phases in terms of offenses against women and children. A lot that you have addressed, not just in terms of the role that law can play, but also how social or psychological changes in our perspective, in our approach, in our understanding can bring about will be very relevant in terms of addressing these threats, ma'am. So could you please elaborate a bit more from your perspective and what do you think will work the best in situations?
One side of this COVID situation is non-technological and the other side is technological. Now on both sides, the women have taken a beating. There has been more domestic violence. There has been more child sexual abuse. there have been this work from home where some of the blessed people like us can really devote more time and do whatever that we want to do. But there have been women who have not been able to work. Even in Columbia University, in the Department of Seismology, the researchers found that the papers which were given by women researchers dwindled by 50%, and the papers which were given by men researchers increased during COVID. Because at the time when everything was under lockdown, the women, as caregivers of their children, of their parents, etc., had to devote more time in the house even for that. And they have to do multitasking, wear two hats as we always do, and come out kind of winners, as you say. But even in those elitist fields, this is what had happened. And work from home and work at home is a different concept. Both of these are different. So far as technological aspects are concerned, there are so many crimes against women in the domestic sector where their Wi-Fi's are put off from outside, then their locks are put off. They are flashed pornographic content, and this is all by their partners and husbands. So that also happens, and technology, she has to sort of move ahead with technology. Even when women have gone to hotels, they have been harassed by their partners and their husbands. And now there is an app where so many of the hotel chains have allowed women, when they enter through a particular app, to have privacy, so that the receptionist does not even give out their names, because then they are again harassed domestically, with their partners. So these are the various facets that come up. They have been more pronounced during COVID. A simple thing like transportation in Bombay, it was found that when the suburban trains were not working and the buses were working, it hit women much more than men, because the buses took, say, about 2.5 hours to send the people home, whereas the train would have taken half an hour, and the women would put their children in creches, etc. They would have to go and pick up the children after their work. They have to reach home late. They have to start their, I would say, permanent job, the second permanent job, as soon as they go home, and there is no respite. And yet they stand tall.
That's true. So it's been a really tough journey for women.
And
but
I just saw Justice Ajit Shah. Welcome, Justice Ajit Shah.
Yes.
Thank you, Roshan.
I was
Thank you.
told earlier.
Sir, hearty welcome from my end too. And I believe I've asked Rahul to just check with Justice Varieva. I await his signing in. Ma'am, what you said, in fact, I was just going to close that query out with the quote you have brought out. A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she gets into hot water. You've quoted Eleanor Roosevelt in this. So it actually points to some of the issues that you started off with. But I also found one other quote that you have relied on, very intriguing. Nani Palkiwala's, where I quote thus, "We are like a dog on a long leash. Within that limited field of movement, we have freedom of choice." So to a large extent, I believe that's the situation that we as women have faced, because we have choice, we have freedoms, but there is that invisible leash that is always there, and we have not really been able to throw that off. So what are the kind of, and this in itself was a surprising perspective when you look at it from the gender lens. So could you please share some more of this and other perspectives, surprising perspectives, alternative perspectives that you may have come across, ma'am?
Okay. And now, so far as this is concerned, yes, we feel that a woman has to make a choice. But no, it's not true. Men also have to make their choices. Men also have got certain constraints, and we all work under them, and we have to respect one another and work together. That is what I got from Nani Palkiwala's this quote which I have given. He wanted to be an English teacher and became a lawyer, and then became a successful lawyer. And of course, there are so many successful lawyers, of course. But so far as women are concerned, there are those gender roles which are given. You can do only this, you cannot do that. And today we find that women are in various sectors of law and in various other worlds. They are commentators, they are legislators, they are everything, because you give them a chance. And this is what they call the theory of nature and nurture. By nature, you can find something, but by nurture, you can bring out the best in a person. And that can be both for men and women, equally, absolutely equally.
I did take the Palkivala quote and twisted it around a bit, but then the way when I read it, this was the mental thought that actually came to my mind. Well, we are on the International Women's Day. It's not all sad or difficult stories out there. There are many success stories. As Khalil Gibran says, the cup runs as deep in sorrow as in joy. Of course, I reversed the order there because I would like to now request you to walk us through some of the success stories, and also with special emphasis on what is the role that men play in terms of gender equality. Because I personally believe, and I think we kind of mentioned this in the meet and greet phase of today's session, that men actually play a lot more important role to ensure gender equality than just women. I'm really thankful that I have, out of some of the instances you have mentioned, particularly of men against violence and abuse, I'm really happy to be associated with and partnering in some of our joint initiatives with people like this. Ma'am, what have been your experiences and what do you think is not just the success stories of today, but what do you see as the way forward from here?
I have given you various firsts in my book. Those were the things that intrigued me the most. There are so many firsts of women through the times, you know, the first lawyer, the first doctor, the first judge, Anna Chandy, etc., etc. From there, when we move on, we have come today to commoners who have done so much. And that is what I really liked, you know. There is a lady in Odisha. She's called the Queen of Transmission Towers. She goes up on the television towers and she repairs them. So when she started that work, people looked down upon her and they said, oh, this is not a woman's job and you cannot climb, etc. Today they call her the Queen of Transmission Towers. There is something called rice cultivation, where in Kerala, under the Kudumbashree program, a woman came out and said that with 1 acre of land, you can cultivate rice and you can export rice. And she's brought about rice revolution, as they call it. These are the real heroes of everyday life. And we take our lessons from them, because it is not only doctors and lawyers who make up the world. It is the common people who make up the world. We are all together in that. So in my chapter on triumphs, I have given many of those kind of little stories. Now, for example, the Jyoti Kumari, she brought her injured father on a cycle from Gurugram to Durbaga, that is from Haryana to Bihar. And she's been now offered, you know, cycles and film roles, etc. And she says, no, I want to study first and I will be playing my own role afterwards in the school. She is my hero. I would take it that way. Not really a person who just kind of, you know, has all of those degrees or qualities. These are the people who make their life. As they say, that is not only great people who make a nation great. It is small acts of small people also that make a nation great.
Absolutely.
So these are in everyday life. And I've given ever so many examples of these trials as well as those triumphs around the world, the various pictures in various different chapters. Absolutely,
ma'am. In fact, again, I draw from the book in extracting your the quote, Rumi's quote, which you have relied on, and it goes thus: "It is your road and your road alone. Others may walk it with you, but no one can walk it for you." It really captures the situation that every single one of us, not just as women, but as people, face that we have to choose the road that we need to walk on. And we should be grateful when we have companions who not only support us through that, but lend a helping hand. But absence of that is not necessarily something that should stifle our initiative. Ma'am, my TEDx talk was on this subject of showing up. And I had focused on the aspect of how we as women believe that being invisible is something good. That when, the most successful of women would still hesitate to talk about her successes. She would believe that it is something to be swept under the carpet instead of the bad aspects of life or the negative aspects of life. In your experience, what is, or rather I would rephrase it to say, from your experience, I'd like you to finally share your advice or just your thought for youngsters in our profession and to encourage them to stand up and to show up. Ma'am, you showed up for all of us. You showed up not just in terms of what you've done so far, but what you will continue to do. So please do share your thoughts to encourage others also to show up and to contribute to the society.
Yes, I would say the show up should be by boys and girls both. We have to nurture boys and girls both equally. It is not only that girls must show up, but the research has shown that even the gait of the women is different from the gait of the men because of the confidence gap. Michelle Obama, in her Becoming, the book Becoming, has written about how boys have a lot of confidence and they come out in their classes in American universities with answers. And ultimately you find that there is really nothing much in them. So it is only the confidence gap, and that there is research done that boys have more confidence and less competence. Girls have more competence and less confidence. And therefore they must, again, we don't have to bring down the boys, no way. We have to keep all of them on par, and we have to nurture all of them together. That would make a good society.
Ma'am, as always, you have inspired us and also taken us through your journey in a very fun and engaging manner. Thank you so much for showing up and for writing not just one, but your second book. And I'm sure your journey is not going to stop here, and there'll be many more. And in some manner, I hope to be always a part of this journey of yours. Thank you so much for these wonderful shares. And I move on now to our two esteemed panelists. And ma'am, both of them have now joined us. Justice Varyeva, apologies if there were any technological difficulties in joining. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. And yes, Justice A.P. Shaw, I would now request you to give your address on the topic of the day.
Thank you, Nappinai. Very good evening to all of you today, Justice Sam Varyeva and other distinguished guests. And of course, congratulations to Justice Roshan Dalvi for publishing her second book, Women, Her Trials and Triumphs. I must also thank Justice Roshan Dalvi for inviting me to speak today. Having read her book in some detail, I must say that this is an impressive exposition on how law and society have determined the trajectory of gender relations the world over, and how the definitions of sex and gender have evolved over the years. She does this through a detailed exploration of particularly women's struggles and achievements, not just in India, but all over the globe. And this book will prove to be invaluable to those interested in questions of women's rights, equality, and gender justice. The book is papered with anecdotes from her personal life, examples from the rest of the world, and informative tidbits. From the beginnings of how gender bias is encouraged and embedded in childhood, through to how such biases are perpetuated in adolescence and adulthood in small but significant ways, she indulges in a thorough examination of women's rights and their position in society in all spheres of life. The ray of hope she offers is how women have succeeded through adversity over decades and centuries. And there is a long list of achievement by women in various spheres, which you discussed during your interview with Justice Roshan Dalvi. Justice Dalvi also discusses various judgments of courts, both Supreme Court and High Courts, and delineates how the Constitution deals with the idea of affirmative action. In her book, she speaks of the Purush Pradhan society. Although I feel the more appropriate term is Purush Sattak and not Purush Pradhan. Since today is a Women's Day as well, I thought it would be interesting to give a historical perspective on the matter. Evidence suggests that before Manu and the Manusmriti, women were far more free, and you commonly found societies that were matriarchal and matrilineal. Women had to carry out some duties, but were not bound to the home. With the advent of the institution of marriage, when women started residing with me, and slowly the man took everything into his hands. And that is when the confinement of women to homes all began. It did not happen in a day, of course, but over a long period of time. The result, though, was that matriarchal societies eroded, and along with the urbanization, Purush Sattak societies also strengthened. Power struggles and wars became more common. The aggressive masculine personality began to gain predominance, and new rules for women were made. This was happening all over the world, not here only. When it comes to India, according to Manu, the female is subordinate to the male and the outcast to the upper caste. He infamously wrote that in childhood, a woman should be protected by her father, in youth by her husband, in old age by her son. Verily, a woman does not deserve freedom. What is lesser known is that one of the earliest instances of defiance to this system envisioned by Manu came from women's sense in Bhakti tradition. Defying social norms and taboos, these women would call out men for sexual advances and protest against their own objectification. Examples of such women abound. Karai Kal Ammai famously turned into a skeleton when confronted by a lustful male. Mahadevi, another woman saint, threw away her clothes, and with that, the investment in society that the division between male and female that differential clothing signifies. Abandoning modesty, she walked naked, covered only by her dresses. Some of her famous poems are in defense of her nudity. These women not only challenge gender divisions, but also caste divisions, crossing over and questioning conventional wisdom about caste hierarchies. Essentially, the Bhakti tradition offers a whole host of alternative models for women beyond the familiar Sita and Savitri stereotypes. Another female character who challenged norms was Draupadi. Justice Dalvi referred to her in her book. I would go so far as to term her character as that of a proto-feminist, and is beautifully laid out in Iravati Karve's Yugant. In the Bhakti tradition, almost every subcaste had a saint, with a running theme of anti-hierarchical egalitarianism. However, the Bhakti tradition failed to penetrate the deep-rooted discriminate systems. Thus, in every sphere, women came to be subordinated and confined to the home, and women became viewed only as a commodity. In the West, there was a dramatic social change after the publication of, in 1949, of Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex, where she examined how society controlled women's life, taking us through her childhood, her youth, sexual urges, marriage, and old age. She also pointed out the prevalence of the male gaze, that whatever was producing art, literature, music, and culture generally was from the male perspective. Even women writers use the male gaze themselves. She raised a very pertinent question in the context of subordination of women, that whether women are even treated as human beings. One quote from the Beauvoir stands out memorably for me and captures this very meaningfully. The adolescent boy too undoubtedly dreams of women. He longs for her, but she will never be more than an element in his life. She does not sum up his destiny, but the girl, since her childhood, and whether she intends to stay within or go beyond the bounds of femininity, has looked to the male for fulfillment and escape. He is the liberator. He is rich and powerful. He holds the key to happiness. He is Prince Charming. 14 years after the Beauvoir, Betty Friedan, with her book, The Feminine Mystic, brought about the second wave of feminism and sowed the seeds for the right to equality, right to vote, opportunity in employment, equal remuneration, abortion rights, and so on. In India too, all these ideas were being absorbed in mixed ways over decades, but also being adopted, and this, according to me, is very relevant, according to the local needs and concerns. Subramanya Bharati, Rabindranath Tagore, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Agarkar, Phule, Periyar, all of them contributed in different ways to the feminist movement in India. But with the general understanding that freedom is not about the home alone. Indeed, even today, we should avoid reducing women's rights to mean that men should take on more household responsibilities. Indeed, it is a much larger conversation involving the economy, politics, participating in intellectual thought, society, culture. Today, in all these spaces, women are still considered, usually relegated to second place. And this is what women need mukti from. As one activist pointed out, the women's movement is not about Stri Mukti, but also about Mano Mukti. The women's movement also lends itself to be more meaningful conversation about a world without atomic weapons, peaceful coexistence, the removal of poverty, non-violence, and environmental protection. In India, the constitution renders things like birth, religion, sex, and creed irrelevant, but the battle still continues. In reality, we still have oppressed classes, oppressed women, whether it is a matter of gender, caste, oppression, discrimination, still prevails all over. A classic example is the ongoing UP elections, where the pivotal issues and debates are still about castes. There is no denying that small steps are being taken, but these are not sufficient. We are far from the end goal of truly equal society, which at present is nowhere in sight. To quote the Beauvoir again, it is difficult indeed for a woman to act on a plane of equality with a male, as long as this equality is not universally recognized and correctly realized. Justice Dalvi takes note of all this through a detailed list of achievements made by women in India and abroad in different spheres, but that is only a part of the story. Justice Dalvi's book is actually also a perfect opportunity to talk about something she herself does not discuss in detail, but which has interested me for years, which is women in the legal profession in India and diversity and representation on the bench in particular. We have come a long way from the days of Cornelia Sorabji, the first Indian woman to study law and to practice as a lawyer, who blazed a trail for women in the legal profession over a century ago. But it is sad to note that many of the issues that she faced in her time, because of her gender, such as male bias and discrimination, remain even today. The judiciary's focus on pendency, backlog, and delay has meant that diversity of the institution gets relegated to the background, emerging mostly when a so-called minority candidate is proposed to be appointed as a judge. It is no surprise that even after more than 7 decades of independence, the Supreme Court has had only 11 women judges, and high courts have approximately only 1 female judge out of every 10. Diversity has never received the attention it deserves, but is important for many reasons. Firstly, when a judiciary is representative of society as a whole, it signals an equality of opportunity to enter the judiciary. Secondly, a more representative judiciary can arguably make a substantive difference in judicial decision making. Thirdly, and most importantly, representativeness indicates that institution enjoys the confidence of the community it serves. In the words of Brenda Halley, who has served as the President of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, the only woman to have held this post and is now a member of the House of Lords. And I quote her, "If the people in charge of the judicial system are overwhelmingly from one section of society, then the justice system does not reflect the very values it is there to uphold. In a democracy governed by the people and not by an absolute monarch or even an aristocratic ruling class, the judiciary should reflect the whole community and not just a small section of it. To ensure equality and opportunity, the recruitment process for judges must change. It must be fair, transparent, and attract the best talent. Going beyond this, however, if we focus on ensuring democratic legitimacy, we should also inquire into which social groups need adequate representation and how best to achieve that. We should also ask if affirmative action is required and to what extent. If we want to ensure that diverse perspectives are reflected on the bench, we must look beyond social and political identities of judges towards their reasoning quality. Arguably, diversity has not been a part of public discourse because of the lack of data. But occasional studies have highlighted the gender imbalance among states and districts, especially in the lower judiciary. In a study a few years ago, out of nearly 16,000 lower court judges in India, less than 30% were women. Bihar, Jharkhand, and Gujarat performed the worst, hovering at 15% or below. In contrast, Meghalaya and Sikkim had women's representation at 73.80% and 64.70% respectively. Another key barrier to women practicing law is societal perception. Clients tend to trust a male lawyer rather than a female lawyer, and sometimes this perception extends even to judges. For instance, a woman lawyer I had recommended while in Madras High Court for judgeship was rejected on the grounds of being rude. She was a fiercely independent lawyer and could stand up to the judges. She was not rude. Similar behavior from a male counterpart may not have induced such harsh judgment. Note that the Supreme Court has only once elevated a woman from the bar to the bench. We have seen many landmark judgments recently on women's rights issues, such as triple talaq, hadia, section 498A, IPC, but no female judge was part of the bench in any of these cases. Whether the only judge, Justice Bhanumati, should have been on these benches is not really the problem. The problem is that nobody really cares about that. Of course, the statistics have changed since then. We presently have 4 women judges in the Supreme Court, but the underlying principle and concerns remain. Several countries have taken steps to strengthen judicial inclusivity. The American Bar has a judicial diversity initiative and regularly examines issues of race and gender bias and makes recommendations to increase diversity. The United Kingdom's Judicial Appointment Commission is mandated to encourage diversity while selecting candidates. A Judicial Diversity Committee also tracked progress made towards ensuring a more inclusive judiciary. Canada has similar provisions. Unusually, South Africa's constitution itself exhorts the need for the judiciary to reflect the country's racial and gender composition. The idea of diversity in any context cannot be confined to the ambit of gender alone, although undoubtedly equal representation of all genders should be the norm. In 2014, the Supreme Court recognized the transgender persons under the law. Since then, the discourse around gender has moved beyond the binary of male and female. A holistic understanding of diversity necessarily requires embracing persons from different, if not all, religions, castes, states, sexual orientations, physical abilities, languages, and socio-economic backgrounds. Globally, we see a strong policy focus on ensuring a more diverse judiciary. Often, policies translated into law, thus laying stronger foundations for diversity within the institution. In India, occasionally, CJIs make public statements about diversity and representation on the bench. The current CJI also spoke about this, particularly the need for having more women judges. But beyond getting some headlines in the newspaper, there is no real change in the situation. What is missing in India is precisely such a strong, sustained policy focus on working towards a more diverse judiciary. A public debate on the need and kind of judicial diversity we want is critical. One start could be through the publication of something like annual diversity statistics for the judiciary, similar to what is done by the United Kingdom's Courts and Tribunal Service. Often we underestimate the impact of small measures can have towards enabling change. Improving the data around this subject will enable us to regularly track this problem, monitor it, ask more nuanced questions, and develop more targeted solutions. We must also simultaneously think of the role of other institutional actors can play in this regard. For instance, what role can state bar associations play to encourage more women to continue and strengthen their practice? What steps can be taken to prevent their attrition? This question is important given that lawyers from the primary pool of candidates from which judges in the higher judiciary are selected. Therefore, a skewed gender ratio in the pool of candidates is bound to reflect in the composition of the judiciary, especially the higher judiciary. Ultimately, there are multiple routes to the goal of ensuring diversity, multiple ways in which we can think of this problem and develop strategies. But what is clear is that no one branch and no one pathway can be seen in isolation. All these paths must converge to build a resilient movement, and every movement starts with a critical conversation. And I believe that Justice Dalvi's book could not have arrived at a more opportune moment in time. And I hope it becomes a critical catalyst in changing perceptions around questions of gender and diversity, law and equality. Before I conclude, I must add that I was pleasantly surprised to see a reference in Justice Dalvi's book to my favorite author, Chitra Khanolkar, C.T. Khanolkar, a writer, poet, and playwright extraordinary, who also wrote under the pen name of Aarti Prabhu. The reference is that while many female writers take on a male pseudonym, Khanolkar did the opposite, that is, he took on a female pseudonym. While the reference to him is only in the context of the pseudonym, I must add that Khanolkar is arguably one of the greatest literary figures of modern India. In his writing, he portrayed some remarkable female protagonists. The other thing I wanted to tell Justice Dalvi was that her translation of the title of his work, Nakshatran Se Dene, which won the Sahitya Academy Award in 1978 as Valley of Stars, I'm sorry to say this is not correct, since it is actually a reference to constellations and not stars. This as Nakshatran Se Dene it can be interpreted in various ways. Anyway, I just thought that this perhaps, I don't know whether she has taken this translation from the Sahitya Academy's website or it is her own translation, but the title is very different. In any way, I heartily congratulate Justice Dalvi on her commitment, on her efforts, which she's taking to take the women's cause further, her participation in various webinars, her talks, all are very encouraging. The other day I said that the very few judges write or speak after the retirement, and she is one of them who is consistently and constantly writing. I'm very proud of her, and I wish her all best for her future career, her writings, and God bless her. Thank you.
Justice A.P. Shaw, thank you so much for that wonderfully inspiring session. Sir, in my introduction to you, which again I reiterate, you don't need no introduction, but I had mentioned about not just the justice that you had done, but speedy justice in a matter pertaining to sexual harassment at the workplace. So I'd like to therefore reiterate now that you have walked the talk, and in today's talk, you again mentioned and brought about two very important aspects. The first being about the role that justice plays to ensure gender equality. And the second part of your talk, which spoke about gender equality, gender diversity in the justice delivery system. Both of these are well received and are truly important aspects, which I'm sure going forward and within our lifetime, we will see a change in. Thank you so much again, Justice Shaw, for joining us today and for sharing your valuable inputs.
Thank you.
So, it's been an honor and pleasure for me to have been associated with you, sir, and to have worked with you at the Law Commission too when you were there. So thank you once again for making me part of this journey too. I now move on to Justice Varieva. Justice Varieva, in my introductory comment, I made a statement about how the way you conducted the proceedings, my very first presentation before the Bombay High Court was before your bench. And I mentioned about how I got courage to take the leap of faith to move from the Madras Bar to the Bombay Bar when I realized that there would be no discrimination based on gender, caste, community, religion, etc. in your before the Bombay High Court. In fact, taking from Justice A.P. Shaw's mention about the Tamil poet Subramanya Bharati, I'd like to take the liberty of quoting in Tamil now. Achamillai, achamillai, acham என்பதில்லையே, உச்சி மீது வானிடிந்து வீழுகின்ற போதிலும் அச்சமில்லை, அச்சமில்லை, அச்சம் என்பதில்லையே. These are beautiful words of Subramanya Bharati, where he talks about fearlessness, even if the sky is falling on our head. A little reminiscent of Asterix, maybe, but truly inspiring over there. So that leap of faith, that fearlessness came from the absolute gender oblivion and any other, absolute lack of discrimination in any manner that you have shown in the way you have conducted proceedings and your life. Justice Varyava, we eagerly await your session and your shares of your experiences and your journey.
Thank you, Ms. Nappinai, Roshan, Ajit, all the other dignitaries. It is my pleasure to be here with you all today. I have known Roshan for a very long time. She had joined the profession as a junior of Mr. Bobby Zaiwala, and I was a junior of Mr. Marwan Mistry. We were both in the chamber of Sir Jamshedji Kranga. We both practiced on the original side of the Bombay High Court and the Bombay City Civil Court for some years. Then we both became judges. As a judge, first in the City Court, then in the Bombay High Court, Roshan has adjudicated upon a vast number of cases, and her contribution to the field of law is remarkable. I would like to congratulate her on writing yet another wonderful book titled Women, Her Traits and Triumphs. This is a much talked about topic. I would like to take this opportunity to thank her for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. I am indeed honored to be a part of this book launch. We have heard Justice A.P. Shah. He has, as usual, spelled out in detail all aspects of the subject in the book. After his speech, there is hardly anything more left to say. I may only add that Roshan's book reflects upon the gender bias that exists even today in our society and even in the legal field. It surprises me that even today, we have relatively few women senior counsel in not only the Bombay High Court, but also in the Supreme Court. Even today, the number of women making it to the judgeship is nowhere close to or equal to men. 74 years to India's freedom, 48 Chief Justices having served the Supreme Court, and we are yet to see our first women Chief Justice of India. I have in all these years of practice, first as a lawyer, then a judge, and now as an arbitrator, come across extremely bright and hardworking women in our profession. I admit that these women have been in no way less than our male counterparts in knowledge and presentation. It cannot be denied that a female would go through many more crisis points than a male. This is why most women lose their professional interest. Therefore, it is extremely important for us to create around the women a conducive atmosphere and support her with an infrastructure that would at times in her life allow her to be her professional best. To not do so leads to an immense waste of talent. It is important for us all to consciously make an attempt as a society and as human beings to support one another, male or female, in all endeavors. According to a report published by the World Economic Forum, it would take more than 135 years for countries to bridge the gender gap, while countries like Switzerland and Netherlands are leading at bridging the gap. We as a country are still battling the issue at a very preliminary stage and are ranked at 140 out of 156 countries. Having said that, there is something I like to add. I know that what I'm now going to say should not be said at the book release, but I like to comment that even as one admits that there is a tremendous gender bias which has to be addressed, one cannot, in the name of gender bias, go overboard and claim bias where there is none. There is none. I will read out an example given by Roshan in a book. This is what Roshan said. In a happy, well-placed nuclear family of a mother, father, and child, the mother took a month's leave to be with her son and help him with his ICSC examination. Well into the month, and after some 5 exams are over, she went out after making his lunch and his exam bags ready. She requested her neighbor to just remind him to leave at a specific time. The neighbor rang the bell at the appointed time, but the boy did not open the door. She reasoned that the boy must have left home earlier. The mother returned to find the boy fast asleep. She was appalled. The boy had gone to rest for a while and had fallen asleep. He missed the exams. He wasted the whole year. The mother's leave was in vain. Who is the villain in the story? When I did this as a case study in one of my workshops for judges on gender sensitization, I was astonished to get diverse responses from participants. Some unequivocally make up the mother to be violent. Why did she go? Walk just before her son's exam. What did she have to do that could not wait? She was negligent, uncaring, and irresponsible. Some may judge the son himself to blame. He was a boy of about 15 years having an important exam could never be forgiven for going to sleep in the middle of the day. Some also laid the blame at the neighbor's door. Why did the neighbor not go on ringing the bell until he opened the door? Such are amazing gender perspectives exhibited by the judges. Roshan Dalvi. Hardly anyone thought of naming the absent villain, the father. The fact that the mother had to knock on the door of a neighbor itself demonstrated that she could not get any assistance from her own husband. Wouldn't this have been wholly different if the father had been at home even on that day, one day in the month when the mother went out? Why would the mother have to account for the one day that she went out? She may have been constrained to leave for a job requirement. She may have just wanted the day off, and that too after arranging for his meal and bag. Why was she not entitled to go where she liked after being with her son for almost a month? Was the father not bound to contribute to partnership and parenting? Would it make a difference if he too contributed in some measure to be able to understand and emphasize with the lioness share of family responsibility that she single-handedly shouldered? I'm only going by the facts as given by Roshan. On this fact, one is surprised that Roshan seems to blame the blameless husband. All the others are right. The husband cannot be blamed at all. As already stated, one has to go by the facts given. It is not stated that the wife had asked the husband to stay at home and he did not. It is not stated that the wife contacted the husband before going out. It is not stated that the wife informed the husband that she would be going out. It is not stated that the decision of the wife to go out was a planned one and not a such decision. The fact that she had to tell her neighbor seemed to indicate that it was a last-minute decision. To me, it appears that this is not a case of gender bias, but that Roshan herself felt that the woman was at guilt by having failed as an important woman and did not want to fasten the blame on a woman, and thus sought to pass the guilt onto a blameless husband. All I can say is that Roshan, carry on the good work, but do not get carried away. That's why undoubtedly one has to be very conscious of gender bias and must not get carried away and attribute bias in order to cover up all the mistakes that women make. Many people believe that a woman is perfect, but a woman is also human. As a human, it is all right to make mistakes sometimes. What I have said does not distract from the merits of those study and the effort put in by Roshan. This book merely opens one's eyes on gender discrimination and is a must-read book. I wish Roshan all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So, may I request, before we move forward, for all panelists, all speakers, to for a quick photo shoot to do the book release again. May I request you all to just hold the book up, please? Justice Variva. Thank you. Rahul, can you please get the snapshot and then confirm to us once it's done? Rahul, can you unmute yourself and confirm?
Yes, ma'am. I have taken the snapshots.
Thank you so much. So, Justice Dalvi, I will be sharing the official book release picture with you again. Thank you all so much. Justice Variva, you've touched upon certain very important aspects. And one of the topics I actually was always very intrigued about and wished to write on. And I believe that Justice Roshan Dalvi's book effectively addresses this issue, is that of ethics of care. The points that Justice A.P. Shaw raised and Justice Variva have raised, in effect, point to this aspect of the need for ethics of care on the bench and the impact that it would have in the outcomes that would emanate from gender diversity on the bench. So I thank you, not just from me, but from everyone who's part of this system, for highlighting the important issues of ensuring gender diversity and gender parity within systems. We move forward. This is a journey which is not just of Justice Roshan Dalvi, but also of the publishers. There is always, and as an author, I can tell you that this interplay between the publisher and the author is what can ensure a qualitative outcome. Justice Dalvi, I'm not too sure if Gauri Shankar is signed in, but if he is, I'd like Gauri Shankar or a representative of the publisher to address this aspect of their journey in the publication of this book. Rahul, is Gauri Shankar or anybody from the publishing house signed in?
They haven't signed in yet.
Room? Is anybody in the waiting room? Because sometimes they sign in without the name on display.
No, ma'am.
So,
Nobody is in the waiting room. I have checked.
Justice Dalvi, then over to you. And may I make one request? We have about 10 minutes and we have esteemed dignitaries on and off the dais today, in a way, the virtual dais. If we could just request the dignitaries, if Rahul, if you can unmute everybody, if we could just take 10 minutes for some quick thoughts from the participants in terms of many judges have joined us, and it's an absolute honor to have all of you all here with us. Justice Dalvi, if you would permit, and if we could take about 10 minutes for the same, it would be wonderful to hear the perspectives of the bench and bar who have joined us in today's session.
Excellent. Excellent. Mr. Falin Nariman is here.
Indeed, sir, it's a pleasure. I am only meeting you virtually. So I do hope to meet you physically at some point of time. So my respects to you, sir, from here. Rahul, please unmute everybody.
They have been unmuted.
This is, I'm sorry, Mr. Falin Nariman, would you like to share some thoughts?
Oh my.
No, not those thoughts. Mr. Falin Nariman, would you like to share some thoughts? Anyone who'd like to, in fact.
Can we raise hands?
Yes, please.
I did. That was just drawing your attention. You did ask the judges and lawyers to respond, but I'm neither a judge nor a lawyer. Being a teacher, I can.
No, I was the first category.
Yeah. No, that was just.
She's the Dean of Delhi University. She's a professor. Ved Kumari. Nice meeting you. Please come in.
Presently, Roshan, I am the Vice Chancellor at Cuttack at National Law University, Odisha.
Okay.
I've moved for the last 1 year.
Moved
Yeah.
from Place to place. Yes.
No, I was responding to the quote from which Justice Badeva read out and saying the innocent husband. I certainly want to respond to the innocent husband. I don't think that Justice Dalvi in her training were raising the question of whether the husband was innocent or not. The question, in my understanding, reading from that para, I've not read the book yet, but reading from that para, my understanding of the question was that whether the judges need to ask more questions before imposing liability. All the questions which Justice Badeva raised, were the participants raising those questions? Were they making those necessary inquiries to determine who is the culprit? To assume that he's an innocent husband, maybe he's not. But did we ask the right questions before we made up our mind, whether the husband was to blame or whether the wife was to blame? And that's, I think, where the problem lies. That I also do lots of judicial trainings, and we put situations in such manners for the trainings where the judges should ask the right questions. They do not ask the right questions and give a decision. I think that's what Justice Dalvi was referring to when she raised, when they gave a scenario of who is the culprit, that how do we immediately jump to conclusions because of our understanding of who is innocent and whose responsibility was it. Did we ask the question that did the husband ever ask the wife that why, oh, you're doing it for 1 month. Can I also share? We don't ask that question to the husband. And usually in our marriages, the husband is more educated. Why it is her responsibility to teach the child? Why it is not his responsibility? It's not only one instance that we're talking about. We're talking about the general pattern where we expect, even the government says, women will take leave, childcare leave, till the child becomes 18 years of age, up to 2 years. And how long the responsibility the fathers have? 15 days of paternity leave. And today I was at another Women's Day celebration where I did ask that any one of you took the 15 days leave. Not even one of the men present said I've taken a leave for my child's birth. So women, by law, have been told it is your responsibility to look after children when they're examined, when they're sick. And of course, even when they're not sick, in the name of the children's illness, the women take those leaves, childcare leave, to look after the in-laws. Why it is never the husband who has been asked to take the leave and look after his own children, his own parents, if not children? So I certainly think we need to ask different questions. We cannot ask the same standard questions or not even ask any questions and make our judgments. So that was my very sharp response actually to the interpretation which Justice Badeva has given to the writing from Roshan.
Justice Dalvi, would you like to comment on this?
You see, the thing is that a judge must hear those who cannot speak and listen to those who cannot shout. In this story, what I wanted to say was that a woman does her very best and yet is blamed. The man doesn't do on the ground that she did not tell me to do. But did you tell her to do this for the entire lifetime is what my question would have been. So I would call him the absent villain. He was not there because if the husband was there to share in parenting, a wife would not go to the neighbor. The fact that the wife went to the neighbor and told the neighbor to ring the bell was because she knew that her husband was never going to be there with the child. That is what is the latent perspective that we must bear in mind. And that is the point I made in that story. Okay. This is a case study which I had done because this is a true story of what had happened to one child. He lost his entire year. And then, of course, the blame sharing and the blame making and everything. Oh my, the mother went away. But she was there for 30 days. He was not there for 30 minutes. That is the difference in this kind of parenting. It is not joint parenting. And therefore, when we say that children must have both the mother and the father must do things for the child. That was the point I was making.
Okay. Absolutely. In fact, that was a very poignant story in the book about how the child falls asleep and misses the exam, and the mother, the child, the neighbor, everybody is blamed, but the husband is not even in the picture of the blame game. Kind of reminded me of the this riddle we used to pose about this doctor who could not operate on the child because the child was the doctor's son. And we would ask, what is the relationship between the doctor and the son? And not one person would come up to say it's the mother. To take the conversations further, Dr. Shrikant Parsadi has his hand up. So please, over to you. And after that, may I request Justice A.P. Saathi to give the final word before I hand over the podium again to Justice Dalvi for closing comments. Over to you, Dr. Shrikant.
Unfortunately, I'm not able to switch on my video. But I believe words are mightier than the picture in this particular case. I've had the pleasure, while I may not be adding to the conversation at the moment, but we need to take into account at the moment the International Court of Justice, which is deciding on the lives of thousands and thousands of people, is being headed by Justice Donoghue. And she has been at the forefront of such issues in the past as well. And that is a reflection of how far that we have progressed in having a judiciary which is inclusive and is accepting of the fact that opinions and suggestions which are coming in from various genders are to be taken with the same weight as compared to what we had earlier. Justice Dalvi would know this very well, and I've shared very personal pictures about my son and my wife with her, and I've said that in the opening remarks when I joined in before this meeting was being recorded as well. My wife is my legal counsel, and it is not about being a partner. It is about more than the intimacy of a partner. It is about sharing and to discuss freely in terms of what opinion of law that we could take on a particular matter. And I'm not afraid / ashamed to particularly say this. She is far, far superior than me in terms of virtues and in terms of intelligence. And she is in this particular meeting, and I have not found anyone to be as superior as her in terms of the advice that she has given me. And that's where the intimacy of a man and a woman, and let alone be a husband and a wife, the intimacy of a man and a woman comes into picture, because man and women intimately and biologically happen to be united in the thought process. So it is a jigsaw puzzle which fits in quite well, and that is the attribution that Justice Dalvi has very, very nicely brought out in this particular book. And I'm proud to say that Justice Dalvi has written on this. I'm eager to have a copy of it in my desk right away. And it is. I think I'm going to log off from here and go on to Amazon to do that activity, so to speak, so that I can get it quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that share, Dr. Parsadi. Very interesting indeed. Unfortunately, my husband is not signed in today. Otherwise, I'm sure he would also have to agree with you that the wives are always the superior beings here. Justice A.P. Saathi, may we request you to have join us with a quick word from your end, and then over to Justice Dalvi.
Thank you very much, Madam Nappinai. I was just waiting for this moment. Firstly, to congratulate Justice Roshan Dalvi. This is her second book, and I have been, I must confess, I have been advertising her book now and again at the Academy, which will follow suit in this as well. But having heard all the eminent people here, women is the complement of man, not inferior. number one. Number two, very rightly, Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, remembered by Justice A.P. Shah in the book of Justice Roshan Dalvi. Well, you never know how strong a woman is unless the tea bag is dipped into hot water. Well, that apart, I will compare the effort of Justice Roshan Dalvi as that of Mother Teresa, who says that I cannot change the world, but if I'm able to throw a pebble across the ocean, it will definitely send ripples. This is what she has really done through this book. This is an achievement because the very title itself, Trial and Triumphs, a very positive, a very, very positive title to the book. Well, bias, we all know when it becomes to a female child, it commences from the womb. It is very unfortunate. But nonetheless, we also have Ardhanarishwar. Lord Shiva is there. We also have Justice A.P. Shah talked about elevation amongst the judges. We also have Delhi High Court recommending somebody of the LGBT community also. So there are changes and advances, but the book is comparable to that of Linda Hirschman, Sisters-in-Law, where Ruth Ginsburg and Sandra O'Connor have been compared. I will go on talking about it, but in short, women are multi-talented, multi-dimensional, but the law has given them little. This is how I would sum it up. And before I say goodbye, you see, there is no gainsaying that we are in an entrenched patriarchal social structure. And that is what is historically Justice A.P. Shah narrated. But there is one element, positive element to it, which I would like to share. And that is prior to the Smritis, he talked about Manusmriti and onwards. But there is something prior to this Smritis. And that is the knowledge, the supreme knowledge of the Vedas. The Rig Veda acknowledges that women enjoyed freedom in chariot races. They enjoyed freedom to join assemblies like Sabha and Vidhata. This is all contained in the Rig Veda. It is a matter of, as a matter of fact, I just remember there is an author by the name of G.S. Ghurye. He has written Vedic India. And I could collect all this information from a recent article written by one of my colleagues at the Academy, Dr. Geeta Oberoi, who keeps on contributing a lot to this. And she has very effectively compiled all this, that women were given a lot of respect and place in society if you go through the Vedas. The demeanor part began lowering after the sutras and the shastras came. So this was at the fourth stage of the development of our knowledge structure. But nonetheless, they not only, as a matter of fact, if you remember William Jones, Colebrook, Max Muller, and all these people who have contributed to Indology, they have said that women played a part in warfare, decision-making, access to education, and so many things, even music, hymns being sung by women. So I would end with a positive note. Thank you, Justice Roshan Dalvi, and thank you very much for having invited me to this, to attend this book release. Thank you very much.
Wonderful words of encouragement. Thank you so much, Justice A.P. Sahi. And as I said earlier, look forward to meeting at some point of time in the future in person and not just virtually. Before I hand over the podium to Justice Roshan Dalvi for the closing remarks and the vote of thanks, from my end, I would like to thank each and every one of you who have joined us today. You've taken your precious time out to discuss a very important issue. And this discussion, the book, and all that we gain from these perspectives are meant to pave the way forward, and this is not the end of the road. So it's a wonderful beginning of the journey and not just the end. And I'm so glad again to have been part of it. Thank you so much for having me here, Justice Roshan Dalvi, once again, and over to you.
Good evening, friends. I have spoken much in the book, and I would like you to read it, not because I want to sell the book, but really because I want to sell the idea. And the idea is that we are all equal. And that is why I've devoted one chapter in the book, the last chapter, really for lawyers and judges, which is lateral thinking in feminist criminology. And there's so many ways of thinking, and we've seen how far it goes. But if we laterally think, we can change a lot. And that is how in sociology I've put about how women have come up, how women still have trials. We have to now fight for them. You and I may be on par with anyone, but millions are not. And we have to work for them also. But while we are working for them, we cannot forget the other half of the population, which consists of men. They are equally important. They say behind every successful man is a woman, but behind every successful woman is also a man. And it is because of their support that we stand tall. So this is all that. And thanks, Nappinai, you asked me about the children. Yes, about the children. In fact, we are working on that a child must have both parents. And these are children of estranged parents. We are going to have now the child independent lawyer, which is a concept in the West, like so many other concepts, which we have borrowed. And it's good to borrow good concepts. It may be a copy-paste job, but we can do that. We can come together and we can be two sides of the same coin. That is how I would like to end. Thank you. And my thanks to all of you, my brother and sister judges like Justice Sujata Manohar, who has joined in from Manju Goel has joined from Delhi, Mr. Falin Nariman has joined, and there are so many more. I cannot take everyone's names, but I really thank all of you. Let us take this forward together. Thank you. And more than anybody, I thank last Justice A.P. Shah and Justice Varia. Thank you very much for coming and giving your words. As always, Justice A.P. Shah is so well prepared and thinks of the topic. And as always, Justice Variava is quite effusive with his words. Thank you both of you. Good night.
Thank you all. We close the official meeting with this. Rahul, may I request for the recording to be stopped?